The medical frigate Mercy's Edge drifted through the cold darkness of space carrying supplies to the outer colonies. Dr. Maya Cross stood in the ship's medical bay checking inventory lists on her tablet. The sterile white room hummed with the quiet sounds of medical equipment and life support systems. Maya had been a ship's doctor for 8 years now, and she loved the peaceful routine of helping people across the galaxy. The ship's crew was small but efficient. Tom Rivers piloted the vessel with steady hands and a calm demeanor that made everyone feel safe. Kai Okafor kept the engines running smoothly and could fix anything that broke down. 2 alien medics worked alongside Maya. Rillan was a tall, blue-skinned being from the Centauri system with 4 arms that made him excellent at complex surgeries. Vorth came from a world where his people had natural healing abilities that complemented human medicine perfectly. Maya finished her inventory and walked to the small observation deck. Through the reinforced glass she could see stars scattered across the void like diamonds on black cloth. The nearest colony was still 3 days away, and the journey had been quiet so far. She enjoyed these peaceful moments between medical emergencies and supply runs. The ship's communication system crackled to life. Tom's voice came through the speakers with a note of concern. "Dr. Cross, please come to the bridge. We have an unidentified vessel approaching fast." Maya made her way through the narrow corridors to the bridge where Tom sat at the pilot's controls. His face was tense as he studied the sensor readings on his screen. They came out of nowhere. No response to our hails, and they're moving in an attack pattern. Kai looked up from his engineering station. "It's a Korthek raider ship. Those are the ones who attack medical vessels for their supplies." The Korthek were known throughout the galaxy as brutal warriors who showed no mercy to anyone they captured. They harvested organs from living prisoners and sold medical equipment on the black market. Maya felt her stomach drop. Medical ships were supposed to be protected under galactic law, but the Korthek didn't care about laws. "Can we outrun them?" Tom shook his head. "They're too fast and we're carrying too much cargo. I'm sending out a distress signal, but help won't arrive for hours." The Korthek ship grew larger on their view screen as it closed the distance between them. Bright flashes of weapon fire lit up the darkness around them. The Mercy's Edge shook as energy bolts struck their shields. Warning lights flashed red across. The bridge and alarms began to sound. "Shields down to 60%, Kai reported as he worked frantically at his controls. More weapon fire hammered their ship. The lights flickered and Maya had to grab a handrail to keep her balance. "Shield failure imminent," Tom said through gritted teeth as he tried to maneuver away from the attacking ship. Massive impact threw everyone to the floor. Sparks flew from damaged control panels and the main lights went out, leaving only emergency lighting. The Korthek ship had used some kind of electromagnetic weapon that disabled their engines and weapon systems. "They're boarding us," Kai said, as he looked at his sensors. Multiple breach points along the hull. Maya heard the sound of cutting tools and explosive charges echoing through the ship's corridors. Heavy footsteps and alien voices grew closer to the bridge. Tom drew a small sidearm, but Maya knew it would be useless against trained Korthek warriors. The bridge door exploded inward in a shower of sparks and metal fragments. Smoke poured through the opening and dark figures moved through it. The Korthek were massive humanoid beings covered in dark scales with claws instead of fingernails. They wore black armor and carried weapons that looked designed more for torture than quick kills. The lead Korthek was even larger than the others, with scars covering his face and arms. Red eyes glowed in his reptilian features as he looked around. "The bridge. I am War Chief Grendak. This vessel now belongs to us." Tom raised his weapon, but a Korthek warrior moved faster than Maya thought possible. Clawed hands knocked the gun away and grabbed Tom by the throat. The pilot gasped for air as he was lifted off his feet. "Resistance is pointless," Grendak said in accented but clear English. "We know this is a medical ship. You will cooperate or you will suffer." The war chief's voice was deep and threatening like grinding stone. More Korthak warriors entered the bridge and grabbed Kay and Maya, their claws dug into her arms through her medical uniform. She could smell their alien scent, which was like sulfur and old blood mixed together. "Take them to their medical bay," Grandak ordered. "We will extract what we need from them there." The warriors pushed the human crew through the damaged corridors of their own ship. Maya saw that Rillan and Vorth had already been captured and were being dragged along by other Korthik soldiers. The medical bay had been transformed into something from a nightmare. The Korthik had moved the medical equipment around to create what looked like an interrogation room. Bright lights focused on the center, where they had placed several chairs that now looked more like restraint devices. Grandak entered behind them and studied the medical equipment with obvious interest. "Human medicine," he said with disgust. "So soft and weak. You spend all your effort trying to preserve pathetic life instead of accepting the strength that comes from death." Maya felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. These aliens had attacked a medical ship which violated every law of civilized space. They were going to torture her crew for information about human medical technology and military medical facilities. "We are healers," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We help anyone who needs medical care regardless of their species." Grandak laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "That weakness will be your downfall. Today you will learn what real strength looks like." He gestured to his warriors, who began strapping Tom into one of the medical chairs. The Korthak war chief picked up a surgical scalpel from Maya's own medical kit and examined its sharp edge. "We will start with simple questions. Where are your military medical bases? What are the access codes for your medical databases?" When Maya didn't answer, he nodded to one of his warriors. The torture began, and Maya was forced to watch as her crew suffered. The peaceful medical bay that had been her sanctuary for years became a chamber of horrors. But deep in her mind, something else was stirring. Something the Korthak didn't know about her past. Something they would soon regret awakening. Hours passed like years as the torture continued in the medical bay. Maya stood restrained against the wall, watching her crew suffer at the hands of the Korthik warriors. War Chief Grandak had made it clear that he wanted information about human military medical protocols and the locations of Terran Alliance medical facilities. Tom Rivers was the first to endure their attention. The Korthik warriors used Maya's own bone clamps to slowly crush his fingers one by one. Tom tried to stay quiet, but eventually screams escaped his lips as the metal devices ground his pounds to powder. The aliens cauterized each wound with a medical laser to prevent him from bleeding out too quickly. "Tell us about your military medical networks," Grandak demanded as he watched Tom's face contort with pain. "How do human soldiers receive medical treatment in battle zones?" Maya kept her mouth shut even as her pilot's agonized cries filled the air. Tom looked at her through tears and gave a small nod. He wouldn't break either, no matter what they did to him. The Korthik moved on to his other hand when they realized he wouldn't talk. Kai Okafor was next. The Korthik had found neural probe devices in the medical equipment, and they used them to send electrical shocks directly into his brain. Kai's body convulsed as alien technology overloaded his nervous system. Foam appeared at the corners of his mouth, and his eyes rolled back in his head. "These probes are designed to stimulate healing in damaged neural tissue," one of the Korthik technicians reported to Grandak. "But we can reverse their function to cause maximum pain without permanent damage." Maya watched in horror as they increased the power settings. Kai's screams were unlike anything she had ever heard. His voice broke as the electrical torture continued for what felt like hours. The Korthak would stop just before he lost consciousness, then start again when he recovered. The alien members of her crew suffered even worse fates. The Korthak had extensive knowledge about different species, and they knew exactly how to cause the most pain to each type of being. Rillan's forearms was stretched in different directions while electrical current was applied to his exposed nerve clusters. His blue skin turned darker as blood vessels burst from the strain. Vorth's natural healing abilities made him an interesting subject for the Korthak. They would inflict wounds on his body, then watch as his alien physiology tried to repair the damage. As soon as the healing began, they would inflict new injuries in the same spots. His regenerative system couldn't keep up with the continuous trauma. Fascinating, Grendak said as he watched Vorth's failed attempts to heal. Your species must have developed these abilities to survive extreme trauma. We will study this further when we take you back to our research facilities. Maya felt something breaking inside her chest as she watched her friends suffer. These were good people who had dedicated their lives to helping others. Rillen had saved hundreds of lives with his surgical skills. Vorth had healed children on a dozen different worlds. Tom had risked his life countless times to get medical supplies to remote colonies. Kai had kept their ship running so they could reach people who needed help. The Korthek saw their work as weakness, but Maya knew it took incredible strength to face suffering every day and choose to fight against it. The aliens couldn't understand. That healing required more courage than destroying ever could. Grendak grew frustrated as none of his prisoners revealed any useful information. He paced around the medical bay studying the human equipment with growing anger. Your silence proves that humans are as weak as we suspected. You care more about these pathetic individuals than your own species. Maya finally spoke for the first time in hours. We don't abandon our own. That's what makes us different from you. The war chief turned to face her with interest. Different? You think your softness makes you superior to us? He gestured to her tortured crew members. Look at them. They suffer because of your stubbornness. You could end their pain by simply answering our questions. I won't help you hurt more people, Maya replied. Her voice was steady despite the rage building inside her. Grendak laughed and picked up a surgical saw from the medical equipment. Then we will try a different approach. Perhaps watching one of your crew members die slowly will change your perspective. He walked over to where Rillen hung suspended by his 4 arms. The alien medic was barely conscious after hours of torture, but his eyes widened in fear when he saw the surgical saw. We will start by removing limbs, Grendak announced. Then we will move on to organs. You can watch your friend die piece by piece. Maya felt something cold settle into her mind as she watched the Korthik war chief position the saw against Rillen's upper left arm. The sound of the motor starting up filled the medical bay with mechanical buzzing. Rillen tried to pull away, but the restraints held him in place. Wait, Maya said quietly. Grendak paused with the saw blade just touching Rillen's blue skin. You have something to say? Maya looked around the medical bay at her suffering crew members. Tom's hands were mangled beyond repair. Kai twitched occasionally as residual electrical damage affected his nervous system. Vorth's body was covered in wounds that his healing ability couldn't close fast enough, but Maya wasn't really seeing them anymore. Instead, she was remembering other wounded people in other medical facilities, soldiers with missing limbs and burned flesh, civilians caught in bombing raids with shrapnel embedded in their organs, enemy fighters who had tried to kill her friends, but still deserved medical treatment. She was remembering the Proxima Centauri conflict where she had learned that sometimes the greatest mercy was preventing further suffering. Sometimes the only way to save lives was to take others. Sometimes healing required surgical removal of the disease. I said wait, Maya repeated. Her voice had changed. The fear was gone and something else had taken its place. Something cold. And calculating that the Korthek didn't recognize as dangerous, Grendak lowered the saw and walked over to face her. You wish to negotiate? What do you offer in exchange for their lives? Maya looked directly into his red eyes without flinching. I'll show you advanced human medical techniques. Things your people have never seen before. But I need to demonstrate on one of your wounded soldiers. Several Korthek warriors had been injured during the boarding action and they were being treated by their own field medics in the corner of the room. Grendak considered her offer with obvious interest. The chance to learn human medical secrets was exactly what he had hoped to gain from this attack. Very well, he decided. But if you try to deceive us, your crew will suffer worse than anything they have experienced so far. Maya nodded slowly as she was released from her restraints. She walked over to the wounded Korthek warriors and knelt down to examine their injuries. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she assessed their condition, but she wasn't planning to heal them. She was planning something else entirely. Maya knelt beside the wounded Korthek warriors and began her Examination with the practiced movements of someone who had treated thousands of patients. 3 aliens lay on makeshift stretchers, breathing heavily from injuries sustained during the boarding action. Burns covered their scaled skin where defensive weapons had found their marks. Shrapnel wounds leaked dark blood onto the medical bay floor. "These injuries are severe but treatable," Maya announced as she looked up at War Chief Grendak. "I can demonstrate several human medical techniques that will save their lives and teach you valuable information about our healing methods." Grendak moved closer to observe her work. His red eyes studied every movement as Maya gathered supplies from her medical kit. "Proceed, but remember that any deception will result in your crew's immediate execution." Maya selected a neural stimulator from her equipment and held it up for the war chief to see. This device can block pain signals and accelerate healing by stimulating specific nerve clusters. Human battlefield medics use it to keep soldiers fighting even with serious wounds. The first wounded Korthak warrior had burns across his torso where energy weapons had breached his armor. Maya positioned the neural stimulator against his neck where major nerve pathways converged. "I'm going to target the cervical vertebrae to provide pain relief," she explained as she activated the device, but Maya wasn't providing pain relief. She was using her intimate knowledge of anatomy to disable the alien warrior. The neural stimulator sent precisely calibrated pulses into nerve clusters that controlled motor function in the lower body. The Korthak's legs went numb as neural pathways were temporarily severed. "Interesting," Grendak observed as the wounded warrior seemed to relax. "His pain responses have decreased significantly." Maya moved to the second wounded alien who had shrapnel embedded in his shoulder. "This requires careful extraction to avoid damaging major blood vessels," she said as she prepared a syringe with what appeared to be a local anesthetic. The syringe actually contained a cocktail of drugs, designed to induce cardiac arrhythmia. Maya had learned to prepare such compounds during her military service when enemy soldiers needed to be neutralized quietly. The injection site was chosen to provide rapid absorption into the bloodstream. "Human medicine focuses on precision," Maya explained as she inserted the needle. "We can target specific biological systems without affecting others." The second Korthak warrior received the injection and initially seemed more comfortable as the drugs entered his system. The third wounded alien had internal injuries that required more complex treatment. Maya used a medical scanner to map his internal organs while explaining human diagnostic techniques to Grendak. "Our scanners can identify problems that aren't visible externally," she said as she studied the readings. Maya prepared what looked like a standard surgical procedure. She made precise incisions using her scalpel while describing human surgical methods. But her cuts were targeting specific pressure points and nerve clusters rather than treating the injuries. Each movement appeared medical but was actually disabling the warrior's ability to move or call for help. "Your techniques are more sophisticated than we anticipated," Grendak admitted as he watched Maya work. The war chief was completely focused on learning human medical secrets and didn't notice the subtle changes occurring in his wounded soldiers. The first Korthak warrior tried to stand but discovered that his legs wouldn't respond to his commands. Confusion spread across his reptilian features as he attempted to move without success. "Something is wrong," he said in his own language. "I cannot feel my lower body." Maya continued working on the third patient while speaking calmly to Grendak. Neural stimulation can sometimes cause temporary numbness as the healing process begins. This is completely normal and shows that the treatment is working effectively. The second warrior suddenly gasped and clutched his chest as cardiac arrhythmia began affecting his heart rhythm. His breathing became labored and sweat appeared on his scaled skin. "My heart," he managed to say before collapsing back onto his stretcher. "Rapid heartbeat is another common side effect," Maya explained without looking up from her surgical work. "The body's healing responses can cause various temporary symptoms during recovery." Grendak was becoming suspicious as his warriors showed signs of distress rather than improvement. "These reactions seem severe for healing treatments," he said. As he moved closer to examine the patients, Maya finished her surgical procedure on the third warrior. who now lay completely still with his eyes open but unable to move any part of his body. "Different species respond differently to human medical techniques," she said as she cleaned her instruments. "The healing process can take time to show full benefits." The first warrior was now completely paralyzed from the waist down. The second was experiencing severe chest pain as his heart struggled with artificial arrhythmia. The third couldn't move at all due to severed motor nerve connections. All three aliens were alive but completely helpless. "What have you done to them?" Grendak demanded as he realized his soldiers were incapacitated rather than healed. Maya stood up slowly and faced the war chief with cold eyes. "I've given them exactly what they deserved. Your warriors are experiencing the same helplessness my crew felt when you tortured them." The other Korthek guards in the medical bay suddenly understood that their doctor-prisoner had somehow turned the situation around. They raised their weapons, but Maya was already moving toward her medical equipment with purpose. "You think human medicine is weak because we choose to heal instead of harm," Maya said as she picked up a surgical scalpel. "But healing requires complete knowledge of how bodies work. That knowledge works both ways." Grendak drew his own weapon but hesitated as Maya positioned herself between him and her tortured crew members. "You are still outnumbered," he growled. "Surrender now, and your death will be quick." Maya looked around the medical bay at the Korthik warriors who had spent hours torturing her friends. They had used her own equipment to cause suffering instead of preventing it. They had turned her sanctuary into a chamber of horrors. "I took an oath to do no harm," Maya said quietly. "But that oath was about protecting innocent life. You're not innocent." She thought about Tom's crushed hands and Kai's neural damage. She remembered Rilen's torn limbs and Vorth's prevented healing. These aliens had violated everything she stood for, and they would continue hurting others if they were allowed to escape. Maya had learned during the Proxima Centauri conflict that sometimes the only way to save lives was to take them. Sometimes healing required surgical removal of the disease that was causing the suffering. The scalpel felt familiar in her hand as she faced War Chief Grendak. She had used similar instruments to save countless lives over the years. Today she would use them for a different purpose, but the principle was the same. She was a doctor and her job was to eliminate threats to her patient's health. The Korthek war chief raised his weapon, but Maya was already moving with the precise efficiency she had learned through years of emergency surgery. The real fight was about to begin, and the aliens had no idea what they were facing. They thought they were fighting a weak human medic, but they were actually confronting someone who knew exactly how to take apart a living body with surgical precision. Maya Cross was about to teach them the difference between healing and harming when both required the same deadly knowledge. Maya moved with surgical precision as War Chief Grendak raised his weapon. The scalpel in her hand became an extension of her will as years of medical training transformed into something deadly. She ducked under his arm and the blade found the radial artery in his wrist with perfect accuracy. Dark blood sprayed across the medical bay as Grendak dropped his gun with a roar of pain. "Pressure point targeting," Maya said calmly as she stepped back to avoid his clumsy swing. "Standard technique for controlling bleeding during surgery. Also effective for causing it when necessary." The other Korthik warriors moved to surround her, but Maya was already reaching for more medical instruments. A bone saw designed for amputation. Surgeries became a weapon as she activated its high-speed cutting blade. The nearest alien warrior swung his combat knife at her, but Maya intercepted the attack with the surgical saw. The blade cut through the Korthek's weapon and continued into his hand, severing tendons and ligaments with mechanical efficiency. The warrior screamed as his fingers lost all motor control and his ruined hand could no longer grip anything. Maya spun away from his falling body and targeted the next closest enemy. "Tendon severance disrupts muscle function," Maya explained as she dodged another attack, commonly used to prevent muscle contracture during reconstructive surgery. Much more effective than trying to overpower superior physical strength. A Korthek guard tried to grab her from behind, but Maya had already prepared a syringe filled with concentrated anesthetic. The needle found a nerve cluster at the base of his skull and delivered its payload directly into his central nervous system. The alien warrior collapsed immediately as his brain lost connection to his body. Spinal anesthesia blocks pain signals, Maya said as she stepped over his twitching form. Increase the dosage and it blocks everything else too. More Korthak reinforcements poured into the medical bay as word spread of the human doctor's unexpected resistance. Maya used her knowledge of the ship's layout to her advantage, moving between medical equipment and using the confined space to prevent the aliens from surrounding her effectively. A medical laser used for cauterizing wounds became a precision cutting tool in Maya's hands. She adjusted its power settings and focused beam width to create a weapon that could sever limbs with cauterized precision. The first alien to charge her lost his arm at the elbow as the laser beam cut through scale and bone without resistance. Laser surgery requires understanding of tissue density and thermal conductivity, Maya noted as she recalibrated the device. Different species have different vulnerabilities to directed energy. Grendak was trying to stop the bleeding from his severed artery while shouting orders to his remaining warriors. She's just one human, kill her now. But Maya was no longer just a human medic. She had become something the Korthak had never encountered before. A healer who understood exactly how to unmake the biological systems she had spent years learning. To repair, every piece of medical equipment became a weapon in her hands. Surgical clamps designed to control bleeding during operations became devices for crushing windpipes and severing nerve clusters. Maya used them to disable 3 more Korthak warriors by targeting specific anatomical weak points that her medical training had taught her to protect. Compression therapy increases blood flow to damaged tissue, Maya said as she applied a clamp to an alien's carotid artery. Excessive compression has the opposite effect. A neural probe that had been used to torture Kai became an instrument of precise neurological disruption. Maya reconfigured its settings and used it to overload the nervous systems of 2 more attackers. Their bodies convulsed as electrical current scrambled their motor control centers. Therapeutic electrical stimulation can restore function to damaged nerves, Maya explained as the aliens collapsed with smoking neural interfaces. Too much stimulation permanently damages those same nerves. The medical bay was becoming a charnel house as Maya systematically dismantled the Korthak boarding party. Bodies lay scattered around equipment that was supposed to save lives but had been transformed into instruments of precise destruction. The aliens were learning that human medicine wasn't weak or soft, but rather represented complete mastery over the biological systems that kept them alive. Tom Rivers had managed to free himself from his restraints using the chaos Maya created. Despite his crushed hands, he was working at a medical terminal trying to restore ship systems. Maya, I'm getting life support back online. He called out through gritted teeth. Kai Okafor was also moving despite the neural damage from his torture. He reached the environmental controls and began sealing bulkheads to prevent more Korthak reinforcements from reaching the medical bay. They're trapped in here with us now, he said with grim satisfaction. Maya continued her surgical assault on the remaining aliens. A dermabrasion tool designed for removing damaged skin became a device for flaying scales and exposing vulnerable tissue underneath. The high-speed rotating brush stripped away the natural armor that protected Korthak vital organs. Skin grafting requires removal of damaged tissue, Maya said as she applied the tool to an alien warrior's torso. Sometimes extensive removal is necessary for proper healing. An ultrasonic bone healing device was reconfigured to operate at frequencies that disrupted Korthak neural tissue. Maya used it to induce seizures in 3 more attackers as their brain chemistry was scrambled by precisely targeted sound waves. Ultrasonic therapy stimulates cellular regeneration, Maya noted as the aliens writhed on the floor. Wrong frequency destroys cellular structure instead. War Chief Grendak was backing toward the sealed bulkhead as Maya advanced on him. His wrist was still bleeding from the arterial cut, and his red eyes showed fear for the first time. You're insane, he gasped. No healer could do these things. Maya looked around the medical bay at the results of her work. Disabled Korthak warriors lay everywhere in various states of surgical precision damage. None of them were dead, but all of them would carry permanent reminders of what happened when someone threatened a human medic's patients. "I'm not insane," Maya replied as she selected a new instrument from her kit. "I'm thorough. When I treat a condition, I make sure it doesn't come back." Rilen and Vorth were helping each other out of their restraints. The alien medics were wounded but alive thanks to Maya's intervention. All her crew members were free and the medical bay was secure, but War Chief Grendak was still breathing and Maya intended to complete her treatment. The Korthik leader had tortured her friends and violated her medical sanctuary. He represented a disease that needed surgical removal. "Time for your examination," Maya said as she approached him with a surgical scalpel. "I'm going to show you what human medicine really looks like when we stop trying to be gentle." The final operation was about to begin, and Grendak was going to learn exactly what a human medic could do with precise knowledge and sharp instruments. War Chief Grendak pressed his back against the sealed bulkhead as Maya approached with the surgical scalpel gleaming under the medical bay's bright lights. Blood still dripped from his severed wrist artery and his red eyes darted around looking for an escape route that didn't exist. The medical bay had become his tomb, and the human doctor was his executioner. "You cannot defeat me in honorable combat," Grendak snarled as he drew a curved blade from his armor. "I am a trained warrior with decades of battle experience." "You?" "I'm just a weak human healer." Maya stopped 3 meters away and studied him with the same clinical detachment she used when examining any patient. "You're right about one thing. I'm not going to fight you like a warrior because warriors focus on strength and aggression. I'm going to fight you like a surgeon because surgeons focus on precision and knowledge." Grendak lunged forward with his combat blade raised high above his head. The movement was powerful and would have been devastating against most opponents. But Maya had already identified the anatomical weak points in his attack pattern. She stepped sideways and used her scalpel to sever the flexor tendons in his wrist as his arm came down. The war chief's hand immediately lost its grip strength and his weapon clattered to the floor. "Flexor tendon disruption prevents grip function," Maya said calmly as she moved around his flailing attempts to grab her. "Standard treatment for contracture disorders. Highly effective for weapon disarmament." Grendak tried to tackle her using his superior size and weight, but Maya had anticipated this response. She drove her scalpel into a pressure point behind his knee that controlled motor function in his leg. The alien warrior stumbled and fell as his limbs suddenly refused to support his weight. "Nerve block procedures disable specific muscle groups," Maya explained as she stepped back to observe his condition. "Essential knowledge for preventing movement during surgery. Also useful for preventing movement during other activities." The Korthik leader struggled to stand, but his damaged leg couldn't bear weight properly. Maya used his momentary imbalance to inject him with a mild paralytic agent that would slow his reflexes without completely incapacitating him. She wanted him conscious and aware for what came next. Muscle relaxants reduce patient movement during delicate procedures, Maya noted as she prepared another syringe. Proper dosage maintains consciousness while eliminating resistance. Grendak swung wildly with his remaining functional arm, but Maya easily avoided his clumsy attacks. The paralytic was taking effect, and his movements were becoming sluggish and uncoordinated. She used surgical clamps to disable the tendons in his shoulder joint, leaving his arm hanging useless at his side. "Joint immobilization prevents further injury during treatment," Maya said as she applied the clamps with practiced efficiency. "Patient cooperation is not required when proper restraint techniques are employed." The war chief was now completely helpless but fully conscious. Maya dragged him to one of the medical tables and secured him with restraint straps designed to keep patients still during surgery. His red eyes burned with hatred and fear as he realized his situation had completely reversed. "Now we can begin the real examination," Maya said as she gathered her instruments. "You wanted to learn about human medical techniques. I'm going to provide a comprehensive demonstration." Tom Rivers was working to restore ship communications while Kai Okafor monitored the sealed bulkheads to ensure no more Korthik could enter. Rilen and Vorth were treating each other's injuries using equipment that hadn't been contaminated by the torture session. Maya, the distress signal is getting through, Tom reported. Alliance ships will be here in 2 hours. That's plenty of time, Maya replied as she arranged surgical instruments on a tray beside Grendak's table. I need to complete this patient's treatment before other doctors arrive. She selected a neural probe and adjusted its settings while Grendak watched in growing terror. This device maps nerve pathways to identify areas of damage, Maya explained. I'm going to create a detailed chart of your nervous system for educational purposes. The probe sent precisely calibrated electrical pulses through Grendak's body as Maya mapped every major nerve cluster and pressure point. The war chief convulsed as each pulse found another weakness in his biological systems. Maya made careful notes about Korthik anatomy for future reference. Fascinating, she observed. Your species has several vulnerabilities that human doctors could exploit during medical treatment. This information will be very valuable for treating wounded Korthik in the future. Maya switched to a bone density scanner and performed a complete skeletal analysis. She identified stress fractures and joint weaknesses while explaining the medical applications to her semi-conscious patient. Each scan revealed new ways that Korthik physiology could be disrupted if necessary. Bone composition analysis helps determine proper surgical approaches, Maya noted as she studied the readouts. Your skeletal structure has several points where targeted pressure could cause catastrophic failure. A cardiovascular monitor was attached to map Grendak's circulatory system. Maya used ultrasound imaging to trace every major blood vessel while noting optimal locations for arterial access. The war chief's heart rate increased dramatically as he understood the implications of her thorough examination. Vascular mapping ensures safe surgical procedures, Maya explained. It also identifies critical points where blood flow can be controlled or redirected as needed during emergency treatment. Hours passed as Maya conducted the most comprehensive medical examination in galactic history. She documented every biological system in Grendak's body while describing how each could be surgically modified or therapeutically adjusted. The Korthik war chief was conscious throughout the entire process. Your examination is complete, Maya finally announced as she reviewed her extensive notes. I now have enough information to provide any necessary medical treatment to members of your species. Alliance ships were approaching and Maya could hear rescue teams preparing to board the Mercy's Edge. The ordeal was almost over, but she had one final procedure to complete. The treatment plan for your condition requires several surgical interventions, Maya told Grendak as she prepared her instruments. I'm going to make some adjustments that will serve as permanent reminders of today's medical lesson. Maya used her scalpel with artistic precision to create a series of cuts across Grendak's scales that would scar in specific patterns. The wounds were carefully designed to heal properly but leave visible marks that would identify him as someone who had threatened a human medical facility. Decorative scarification has cultural significance in many species, Maya explained as she worked. These particular marks will help other humans recognize your medical history at a glance. She also made precise nerve cuts that would cause permanent minor disabilities without being life-threatening. Grendak would always have a slight tremor in his hands and difficulty with fine motor control. Simple tasks would remind him daily of his encounter with human medicine. Therapeutic nerve adjustment can treat various neurological conditions, Maya noted as she completed the procedure. The effects are permanent but not life-threatening. Consider it ongoing treatment for your aggressive tendencies. Alliance security. Forces burst into the medical bay just as Maya finished bandaging her patient's wounds. They found the human crew alive and recovering while dozens of Korthik warriors lay disabled but breathing throughout the room. War Chief Grendak was unconscious but stable with detailed medical charts documenting his complete physiological profile. Doctor, cross what happened here? The Alliance commander asked as he surveyed the scene. Maya cleaned her instruments and returned them to her medical kit. We had some patients with behavioral problems that required intensive treatment. The prognosis is good for full recovery, but they'll need ongoing therapy for their aggressive disorders. The story of the human medic who turned a medical bay into an operating theater spread throughout the galaxy within weeks. Pirates and raiders began avoiding medical ships after hearing what happened to the Korthik boarding party. The Mercies. Edge became a legend that served as both warning and inspiration. Dr. Maya Cross returned to her duties helping people across the stars. But now everyone knew that human medicine wasn't about being weak or soft. It was about having complete knowledge of biological systems and the wisdom to use that knowledge properly. Sometimes healing required surgical removal of the disease. Sometimes the greatest mercy was preventing further suffering by eliminating its source. Sometimes a doctor's most important tool wasn't compassion, but the precise application of deadly knowledge when gentleness failed to cure the patient. The galaxy learned to respect human medics after that day. They understood that people who dedicated their lives to preserving life also possessed the ultimate knowledge of how to take it away. The healers had shown they could be the most dangerous enemies of all when their patients were threatened. Maya never spoke about what she had done in the medical bay, but she didn't need to. The results spoke for themselves, and the message was clear. Human medicine would always protect the innocent and heal the wounded. But those who chose to become the disease would discover what happened when doctors decided that surgical intervention was the only effective treatment.